the 32-year-old man at the center of a grisly crime, the murder and dismemberment of his own father.
Justin Mohn, a 32-year-old resident of Levittown, Pennsylvania, was a man who mostly kept to himself, often being seen as quiet and a bit eccentric by his peers. However, he also had a reputation as a man who could make others laugh, and was widely known for his passion for football during his high school years. After earning a business management degree from Penn State in the year 2014, Justin appeared to be on a direct path towards success. However, life after graduation proved difficult for Justin. Various financial struggles led the young man to represent himself in several lawsuits against the government over his student loan debt, but not one of his legal battles would ever prove successful. These futile and ongoing attempts would only help to underscore Justin's deep frustration with both authority and institutions, causing a growing sense of complete alienation to form within the young man. And Justin's presence online only contributed to a troubling portrait of his fragile mental state. He portrayed himself online as a musician, an author, and most worryingly, as the leader of a national network of militias. Justin did release 4 music albums, but none ever achieved the success or attention that he was striving for. On the other hand, his writings were often very dark and disturbing, filled to the brim with tirades and diatribes against the American government. Within these, for lack of a better word, manifestos, Justin would express a strong desire to see a violent revolution take place in the country. His novels also chronicled his anger and rage over his poor experiences in school and the difficulty of securing stable employment following his graduation, which ultimately led to him moving back into his parents' home. On the evening of January 20th, 2024, Justin's mother, Denise, returned home to find an absolute nightmare. She discovered her husband's dead body in the bathroom, with his head severed and placed in a plastic bag. In an appalling twist, Justin uploaded a video to his YouTube channel shortly after committing this heinous crime. Within this video, Justin held his father's decapitated head and rambled about various conspiracy theories, calling his father a traitor and waxing eloquent about committing violence against federal workers. The deranged young man declared that so-called traitors, including his own father, should be damned to hell, and called upon militias and patriots all across the United States to take violent action against federal employees. Tragically, Justin's own father was a federal worker with the Army Corps of Engineers, making him the victim of his own son's twisted beliefs. The 14-minute video, titled Mohn's Militia, A Call to Arms for American Patriots, garnered thousands of views before it was eventually removed. Following the upload of this video, Justin fled to Fort Indianatown Gap, which is a nearby military base, in what he claimed was an attempt to mobilize the National Guard to join his cause. However, after law enforcement successfully tracked him down, Justin surrendered without incident. I guess Justin didn't believe in his cause enough to actually bleed for it, now did he? The authorities surmised that Justin's ultimate goal was to incite the National Guard to actually take up arms against the federal government itself. Luckily, he was quickly captured by the local authorities, halting his nefarious plans before they could ever take effect. The internet. What do you think of when you think of the internet? For me, I think of the old adage, can't live with it, can't live without it. I have a truly love-hate relationship when it comes to the internet. You see, I'm old as shit, and so I remember the time before the internet, before the whole world was connected by a supercomputer in all of our pockets. Perhaps it's just the rose-tinted glasses of the past, but I remember it as a better time, a much simpler time. However, as we all know, the age of the internet did dawn, and it changed almost everything when it did. From the very beginning, the strange and the bizarre thrived on the internet. However, in those early days, there was no one around to catalog all of the online mysteries. Luckily, though, that is no longer the case, and today there is a veritable sea of online rabbit holes to try and swim through. It can be a bit overwhelming at times, just jumping in all on your own. So today, allow me to be your guide as we take a look at some of the internet's darkest rabbit holes.
A massive car bomb exploded outside of a large federal building in downtown Oklahoma City, shattering that building, killing children, killing federal employees, military men, and civilians.
Way back in the year 1995, a horrific bombing took place in Oklahoma City. This attack would prove to be one of the deadliest acts of terrorism in all of United States history. In the midst of all this carnage and destruction, rescue workers made a truly bizarre discovery. A single, unidentified, severed human leg was buried in the debris. Now, you would think this wouldn't be much of a mystery. After all, over 160 people lost their lives on that fateful day. Surely the leg came from one of them, right? However, this one severed body part continues to raise questions to this very day. At 8:57 a.m., on the morning of April 19, 1995, a bright yellow Ryder truck pulled up and parked in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. Despite its bright color, the truck went pretty much completely unnoticed by the men and women at work in the building. After all, their shifts were just about to begin, and everyone was understandably in a hurry. Unfortunately, though, disaster would strike only mere moments later. At approximately 9:02 a.m., the Ryder truck outside exploded. The force of the explosion was so great that it rivaled 5,000 pounds of TNT. In mere moments, 1/3 of the building had been utterly vaporized. Over 300 neighboring buildings were also damaged, or even destroyed entirely. The price of all of this wanton destruction would be estimated at close to $652 million. However, it was the toll upon human life that was truly shocking. Tragically, the bombing would claim the lives of 167 people, 19 of which were children. Close to 700 people were also injured in the blast. Within just minutes of the initial explosion, the authorities were on the scene, trying their best to piece together what had just happened. After all, the sheer death and destruction were on a scale that was truly mind-boggling. A day later, on the 20th of April, detectives discovered the rear axle to the previously mentioned bright yellow Ryder truck. Luckily, that single piece of evidence would prove to be extremely important. That axle happened to carry a vehicle identification number, which would ultimately lead investigators to a body shop outside Junction City, Kansas, some 270 miles away from the site of the bombing. By calling upon the memories of the employees working in the body shop, detectives were able to create this composite of the suspect. And it wasn't long before this image was circulating all around the country. On April 21st, an employee of a nearby hotel recognized the man in the sketch. This tip led authorities straight to Timothy McVeigh, a 27-year-old man who was former military. But Timothy was nowhere to be found, and it turned out this was for a very good reason. You see, he was already in jail. As luck would have it, McVeigh had actually been arrested just an hour and a half after the bombing took place, approximately 80 miles north of the detonation site. Ironically, Timothy had initially been pulled over for driving without a license plate. However, once on the side of the road, the officer searched the vehicle more thoroughly and discovered a concealed weapon, which led to McVeigh's subsequent arrest. And the discoveries didn't end there either. Following a much more extensive search of the vehicle, authorities discovered a business card with quite the incriminating statement written on the back of it. The statement read, quote, "TNT at $5 a stick. Need more." As investigators continued to comb through every aspect of McVeigh's life, it was only a matter of time before the true motive of his heinous deed would be revealed. You see, McVeigh was a true anti-government radical. The real kind, not the watered-down version you see so often today. His grievances with the federal government are much too numerous to list out here, but suffice it to say, he wasn't a fan. Timothy was especially angered by the Waco siege and the authorities' liberal use of tear gas on both women and children during that event. It turns out McVeigh himself had been exposed to this same gas during his time in the military, and so he was especially sensitive about it. However, despite having their prime suspect in custody, the authorities weren't convinced that McVeigh had acted alone, and in the end, they would be proven right. Two accomplices, Terry Nichols and Michael Fortier, would eventually be taken into custody. Following these developments, investigators believed the case to be pretty much closed. However, there was still a question that needed answering: the severed leg that rescue workers had discovered in the rubble on that fateful day. Who did it belong to? After all, by this point, almost all of the victims had long been accounted for and buried. Eventually, the leg would be identified as belonging to one of the victims, U.S. Air Force member Lakeisha Levy. And so, the obvious next step was exhumation. However, when the casket was finally raised to the surface, it was discovered that Lakeisha had already been buried with 2 full legs. But as I mentioned previously, the leg had already been identified as belonging to the deceased military veteran, which meant, in quite the gruesome twist, that she had been buried with someone else's leg. And this discovery led authorities to the next most obvious question: who did this leg belong to? Unfortunately, in the nearly 3 decades that have passed since the Oklahoma City bombing, we still don't have an adequate answer to this mysterious question. However, with the internet being the internet, it certainly has some theories. These include the leg belonging to a 4th, as of yet, unidentified accomplice, all the way to the whole attack being a giant psyop undertaken by our own government. For obvious reasons, these theories can probably be taken with a grain of salt. In my opinion, the most likely and realistic theory is that the leg actually belonged to an unknown homeless person who just had the unfortunate luck of being a little too close to the building on that awful day. However, this too is only mere speculation. Whatever the case may be though, the leg represents quite the macabre tale from one of the worst days in recent American history.
You've probably heard, this is the hottest place in the world. 134 degrees Fahrenheit has been recorded here.
Death Valley is a desert valley located in eastern California within the northern Mojave Desert. It is a harsh, unforgiving land that is thought to be the very hottest place on Earth during the summer. However, despite these extreme conditions, on average, over 1 million tourists visit Death Valley National Park every single year. Obviously though, due to both the climate and the unforgiving terrain, Death Valley can be quite the inhospitable place, and not everyone who ventures there actually returns home. Not exactly my ideal idea of a relaxing vacation spot, but hey, to each their own. In July of the year 1996, 4 Germans from the city of Dresden touched down in the US to begin what they believed would be an exciting summer vacation. Little did they know that this trip would inevitably lead to their own doom. Egbert Remkes a 34-year-old architect, was the father of the family. Egbert was accompanied by his 11-year-old son, George, his girlfriend, 27-year-old Cornelia Meyer, and her 4-year-old boy, Max. Together, this group flew in and landed in Los Angeles, excited to explore America for themselves. The mixed family then rented a 1996 green Plymouth Voyager van and set off for Las Vegas. However, it wouldn't be long before the group made the fateful decision to check out Death Valley National Park on their way. It's likely that because they were from out of the country, the group wasn't totally cognizant of just how many dangers and risks Death Valley presented. On the 22nd of July of the year 1996, the family first entered the park. The group stopped at the aptly named Furnace Creek Visitor Center in order to purchase a few guidebooks of the surrounding area. Thus equipped, the family made their way out into the harsh terrain. Over the next several days, the group found many incredible sights deep within the park. However, as I mentioned previously, it doesn't seem that the adults quite realize just how brutal and unforgiving the elements in Death Valley actually are. In the summertime, temperatures can soar to almost 120 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll need a little more than sunblock and a couple of guidebooks to make it in Death Valley when it's that hellish out. The journey the family had set out on was much more dangerous than they anticipated. It would be an understatement to say that the Germans were entirely unprepared for what lay ahead. On July 27th, the family didn't show up for their return flight to Germany. Following this development, Egbert's ex-wife grew very concerned for the group's safety. After a few weeks of unsuccessfully attempting to contact her ex-husband, the woman notified the authorities about the disappearances. Months would go by, with still no word from the 4 missing Germans. However, in the month of October of that same year, a park ranger was conducting aerial surveillance of the valley when he managed to spot a green minivan. Finally, a real development in the case. The van was in rough condition though, sporting 3 fully flat tires, which it had proceeded to drive on for a distance of over 2 miles. Within the interior of the vehicle, authorities discovered a few personal items, including children's toys, a tire jack, and a sleeping bag. The family themselves, however, were nowhere to be seen. Following the discovery of the van, a new extensive search for the missing Germans would get underway. In the end, though, this new search would only turn up a single clue. Miles away from the van, one single empty beer bottle was found, lying next to a sort of homemade seat. By the 26th of October, however, the authorities had called off the search once again. Years would pass without any further answers. After all, the desert doesn't give up its secrets easily. However, in the year 2009, 2 hikers with decades of experience between them decided to look into the case themselves. And after a thorough and extensive search by the 2 men, they would actually find some real answers. 2 pairs of skeletal remains were found, with these later being identified as belonging to the 2 adults. Unfortunately, though, there was still no trace of the missing children, and this would prove to be the very final discovery in the case. So what actually happened here? As you can imagine, the internet has many different theories. One of the hikers who discovered the bodies, a man named Tom, believes that the family may have tried to take a shortcut through the park and ended up getting stranded. After the inevitable breakdown of their vehicle, the family perhaps set out on a desperate trek to a nearby naval base in order to find help. Whatever the case may be, it's obvious that the family drastically underestimated the brutal conditions they'd find in Death Valley. After all, the clue is in the name itself. The internet is a giant contradiction. It can be both a beautiful and horrifying place. I know we like to cover the darker side of things here on this channel, but just remember, for every awful, evil thing that you see, there's something else that's good. So just leave all the evil stuff to me. I won't stop until I've covered every single dark rabbit hole on the net, I might be doing this until I'm 110, but I won't give up. So remember, if you're a fan of true crime or just darker content in general, then please subscribe and stay tuned to Canceled Happiness.